A Boeing 747 was completely ready for takeoff on the runway. Amid dense fog, the pilot pushed up the thrust levers, turned on the headlights, and the aircraft had now crossed the takeoff speed, a speed from which returning becomes almost impossible. But then, amidst the fog, a shadow began to emerge, and this shadow was of another Boeing 747, which was now only a few meters away in the opposite direction on the same runway. What happened next is incredibly difficult to imagine. The question is, how did it come to this point? What was the air traffic controller doing, and what was a small mistake that led to the most dangerous accident in aviation history? This tragic tale unfolded in Spain's Canary Islands, remembered today as the Tenerife airport disaster. Welcome once again to ZemTV's video. Viewers, this story begins on the day before the accident, March 26, 1977. When Pan Am flight, a Boeing 747 jumbo jet, takes off from Los Angeles airport. It was supposed to land in New York to pick up some passengers, and then its final destination was the city of Las Palmas across the ocean in the Canary Islands. This was a chartered flight, and for this reason it was fully booked with mostly older passengers on board who intended to enjoy a cruise ship in Las Palmas. Las Palmas is the capital of the Canary Islands, which is about 100 kilometers off the coast of Morocco, the southernmost part of Spain. This place is quite famous worldwide for its tropical weather, but in 1977, a political tension was hidden behind the beautiful facade of the Canary Islands. Here, a group called MPAYAC was raising its voice for the independence of the Canary Islands from Spain and for its campaign. Often this group also resorted to violence and similar acts. A violent event triggered the start of this dangerous accident. Pan Am Flight 76 picked up passengers from New York's JFK International Airport and departed towards Las Palmas Island. The cabin crew included 6 years Captain Victor Grubbs, First Officer 39 years Robert Bragg, and 46 years Flight Engineer George Vaughan, along with 13 flight attendants and 380 passengers. These were all the details. Pan Am Flight 76, which was now cruising over the Atlantic Ocean. Now, let's move towards the second aircraft, which was also going to be a victim of this accident. At Amsterdam Airport in the Netherlands, KLM Flight 805 was getting ready. This was also a Boeing 747, and it also had to go to the city of Las Palmas in the Canary Islands. In its cockpit were 50-year-old Captain Jacob, 42-year-old First Officer Klaus, and 48-year-old Flight Engineer. William was included. There were 11 flight attendants and 235 passengers on board. KLM Flight 80 took off from Amsterdam International Airport after boarding. Now both aircraft were headed towards Las Palmas Airport in the Canary Islands. Meanwhile, at Las Palmas Airport, two men moved towards the terminal building and leave a bag outside a flower shop, then disappear. A bag with a bomb attached to a countdown timer. At exactly 1 o'clock in the afternoon, a phone call comes to the reception at Las Palmas Airport. The person on the other side claimed to belong to the MPAYSK group, the same group mentioned at the start of the video, and said that a bomb blast would occur at Las Palmas Airport in the next 15 minutes. As soon as the airport staff sprang into action, they evacuated the entire Las Palmas airport before 15 minutes had passed, and their hurry turned into fear when exactly 15 minutes later, there was a loud explosion. Due to this blast, a large part of the terminal building's roof collapsed. After this, all activities at Las Palmas airport were suspended. All flights were cancelled, and flights that were supposed to land there were diverted. Sometime later, the KLM Flight 80 coming from Amsterdam was approaching Las Palmas, but the air traffic controller informed them of the explosion at the airport.
The flight was instructed to land at the airport on Tenerife Island, which was 110 kilometers away from here. The KLM captain landed on runway 30 at Tenerife Airport at 1:38 in the afternoon after an additional 25 minutes of flight. At that very moment, Pan Am Flight 1736 coming from New York had also reached near Las Palmas, and it was also diverted to Tenerife Airport. By this time, almost all flights were being diverted to Tenerife Airport as it was the closest airport. Now, the rush at Tenerife Airport was rapidly increasing. Let me inform you that Tenerife Airport is a small airport located in a mountainous area. Very close to the Atlantic Ocean, its height is around 2,000 feet. This area is surrounded by high mountains, and because of this, when the humid winds from the Atlantic Ocean hit the mountains and move upwards, they quickly cool down and turn into clouds. And all this happening here suddenly is very normal. When the Pan Am flight and the KLM flight landed at the Tenerife airport, the visibility was completely fine. But now, suddenly, the visibility here had decreased due to the clouds. When clouds were on the runway, visibility would decrease to 300 meters, and in the next moment, everything up to 2 kilometers away could be seen clearly. Now, how long they had to stay at the airport was currently not confirmed. Passengers were let off so they could freshen up after the long flight. That long. KLM flight 4805, which had to return to Amsterdam, they decided to refill their fuel tank here so that when the Las Palmas airport reopens, time would not be wasted refueling there. They had just started refueling when the news of Las Palmas reopening came. Both flights boarded passengers again, but the KLM refueling blocked the taxiway. Tenerife Airport is a small airport with only one runway, one taxiway, and one apron where the terminal is located, which you can see in this animation. It was quite abnormal to have such a huge rush here, and that too of Boeing jumbo jets. KLM flight, due to the refueling of flight 4805, Pan Am couldn't leave the terminal and go to the runway. They were told to wait near the terminal until KLM's refueling was completed. At 4:45, KLM's refueling was completed and the captain began preparing to move off the taxiway. Since the apron was filled with other planes, it was also blocking the taxiway. Then the controller gave instructions to the KLM pilots who were parked on the extreme west side of the taxiway to taxi on the runway to the extreme east end, make a 180-degree turn, and prepare for takeoff. When KLM 4805 started to taxi, so the controller gave instructions to Pan Am Air to follow KLM on the runway, but get onto the taxiway from exit C3 because KLM 4805 had to take off from this same runway. Visibility was quite low and was getting worse with each passing minute. KLM 4805 taxied across the entire runway and reached the eastern end, making a 180-degree turn to get into takeoff position. The Pan Am Air pilots also started to taxi on the runway, but due to the fog, they could see the C1 and C2 exits but missed the C3 exit because the C3 exit was heading back towards the apron. Maybe that's why they couldn't see the C3. Secondly, there was also a lack of sign marks at Tenerife Airport. Only indications are placed on the tarmac for the runway exit, but here these sign marks were missing. Here, when Pan Am Flight 1736 was crossing C2, at the same time KLM 4805's captain requested takeoff permission from the control tower, and this is where a series of back-to-back confusions began. Due to the fog, neither of these planes were visible from the control tower, and there was no radar system installed at this airport. At this moment, the control tower started to inform KLM about which route to take after takeoff, but in this message there was no mention of takeoff.
Permission was not granted, but KLM assumed that they might have received takeoff clearance, and the KLM captain replied, "We are at takeoff." Now, whether they actually said "we are at takeoff" or "we are taking off" is still not clear. But in response, the control tower said, "Okay." But after a gap of a few seconds, the control tower cleared. "Stand by for takeoff, I will call you." This was a very important message, which clearly stated not to take off yet. But this message never reached the KLM cockpit because at that moment they were near C3 on the runway itself. The Pan Am Flight 1736 pilot who was listening to the entire conversation also relayed a message that we are still down the runway. This means the control tower's message to KLA to stand by and the Pan Am message were relayed at the same time, causing only a distortion-like sound in KLA's cockpit, Pan Am Flight 1736, which unknowingly had already crossed C3. The control tower told them to let them know when they exit the runway, to which the Pan Am pilots responded with, "Okay, hapies non taziam da afa desenia." By this time, the captain of KLM Flight 4805 had pushed the thrust levers up, understanding that permission from the control tower had been granted. Here, the flight engineer of KLM had overheard the message given to Pan Am Flight by the control tower and immediately informed the captain that they were still on the runway. But for some reason, the captain perhaps misunderstood something in the noise and just said, "Oh yes," and continued with the takeoff. Due to the fog, they could see only 300 meters of area. During this time, suddenly the Pan Am pilots saw headlights appear on the runway through the fog. At first, they thought that maybe the KLA flight was stationary, but the next moment, they realized that it was rapidly approaching them. They immediately tried to turn the aircraft, but by then it was too late. The KLA's right engine tore through the Pan Am's first class section. The landing gear also broke and the aircraft fell 150 meters away on the runway and a terrifying fire erupted. Since its fuel tank was completely full, one can easily imagine the intensity of the fire. All 248 passengers present were killed on the spot. The passengers of the Pan Am flight did not even get a chance to think about what was happening. The first-class passengers perished immediately. However, several passengers in the economy class below got the opportunity to escape through the hole in the ceiling. Many jumped from a height of 20 feet to save their lives. Out of the 396 passengers on the Pan Am flight, only 61 people survived. Perhaps more people would have survived, but because of the fog, the control tower learned about the accident a little later. That too, only when another plane standing on the apron saw the flames blazing on the runway and informed the control tower. The rescue service vehicles were also unable to move very fast due to the fog. In this accident, a total of 583 lives were lost in the blink of an eye. In the investigation, the cockpit voice recorders of both planes were examined, and this is where all the details emerge. The ones you've seen in this video. The investigation team concluded that behind this accident was a chain of events. First, the bomb blast at Las Palmas. Then, KLM having its fuel tank filled at Tenerife Airport and blocking the taxiway. If they hadn't done that, Pan Am Flight 1736 would have taken off earlier. After that, suddenly reduced visibility and Pan Am missing the C3 exit. But the investigation team held the crew of KLM Flight 4805 responsible for this accident. After all, they continued with the takeoff without permission, even though 5 seconds earlier, the flight engineer had stopped the captain. The Tenerife airport disaster proved to be a wake-up call for the entire aviation industry. After this incident, many changes were seen in the aviation industry. Call signs were altered, their rules were changed, radar was made mandatory at all airports, and it was made essential